So, picture this. It is May 8, 2026. A man is just standing outside this massive building, watching people go about their busy lives. And suddenly, from inside the building, he hears the terrified screams of a woman.
Okay, that is an intense way to start.
Right. It's wild. But the weird thing is, nobody else seems to care at all. The people outside are just, laughing and having a great time,
Wait, really? Just ignoring her?
completely ignoring her.
Yeah.
So he turns to a woman standing next to him and asks, what is that? Why is she screaming? And the woman just smiles at him and says, it's a horror house. If you want to save her, go inside.
Oh, man, I feel like I know where this is going.
Yeah. So he walks up to the doors, but before he can even grab the handle, someone just shoves him inside from behind, and the doors slam shut. He's totally trapped. And right in front of him are these three horrific women.
Like actors or actual monsters.
In this context, monsters. Wide-eyed, huge bellies, absolutely terrifying. One of them steps forward and says she wants to squeeze him. Another one pulls out this gleaming samurai sword and gestures like she's about to chop his head off.
That is genuinely terrifying.
And the third one lunges at him with a knife, aiming right for his stomach.
I mean, most people would just be completely paralyzed in a scenario like that. It is literally the quintessential nightmare, right? Being trapped in a confined space with supernatural threats. You're supposed to run?
Exactly, you run. But this man doesn't run. As the third woman thrusts the knife at him, he simply reaches out, catches her hand, twists the blade around, and pretends to slit her throat with her own weapon.
Wow. Okay, that's a twist.
Right. And the monsters are entirely unprepared for this. They absolutely lose it, screaming in terror and running away from him. Then the lights suddenly snap on, and the man proceeds to turn the entire horror house completely upside down.
He basically becomes the monster?
Yes. The people outside who are laughing are now the ones in shock because the supposed victim just became the scariest thing in the room. And then he wakes up.
Okay, so it was a dream, but it wasn't just like a random hallucination from eating too late, right? He interprets this as a direct message from God.
Exactly. This incredibly vivid dream was actually posted online by a man named Narciso Olalo. He is a Filipino faith healer who refers to himself, quite literally, as the #1 instrument chosen by God.
Which is quite the title.
It really is.
Right.
And today we're taking a deep dive fully into his world to understand his unique spiritual philosophy, his intense methods of healing, and his, radical, unyielding views on fear, faith, and wealth.
We actually have a pretty extensive digital footprint from him to pull from today.
We do. We've got his writings, his public teachings, and some remarkably candid audio recordings where he just straight up explains the actual architecture of his theology.
It is such a fascinating world to explore because we are getting a real-time look at how absolute belief is constructed. We aren't just observing a healer here, we're observing a man who is actively trying to dismantle the way his followers process reality.
Let's start by unpacking that horror house dream, actually, because he didn't just write it down in a diary and forget about it. He used it as the foundation for a Zoom teaching session for his followers just a few days later.
Right, on May 10th. And when you look at his breakdown of that dream, the core message is surprisingly psychological.
Yeah, how so?
Well, he argues that people actively teach themselves to be afraid. In the dream, he defeats the monsters because he refuses to accept the premise that he is the victim. He literally turns the knife around.
He flips the script entirely.
Yeah. His fundamental point to his followers is that the monsters only have power if you agree to play the role of the terrified customer. He is telling them that the horrors in their lives, like their daily anxieties, their spiraling problems, the worst-case scenarios that haven't even happened yet, are mostly illusions.
They are buying a ticket to their own mental horror house.
Yes, that is exactly how he frames it.
And he doesn't just preach this as a metaphor either. He lives it out in the physical world in ways that are, honestly, frankly, hilarious.
Oh, the Queensland story?
Yes. In one of his audio recordings, he talks about going to an actual physical horror house in Queensland, Australia, with a group of friends. And while everyone else is, covering their faces and screaming, Olalo was wandering around in the dark, actively taunting the actors.
Which must be so frustrating for them.
Right. An actor jumps out at him, trying to do a jump scare, and Olalo's only concern is getting Dugo, which is fake blood on his clothes. He's touching their costumes, telling them they look good, completely ruining the immersive experience for the people just trying to do their jobs.
He is totally breaking the social contract of the space. I mean, you pay the admission fee to be scared, but he refuses the transaction.
He just won't participate.
Right. And he extends this exact same refusal to the actual supernatural. He talks about walking through completely unlit, dark graveyards alone at night with this startlingly practical logic. He just says, well, dead people can't hurt you, so why condition yourself to be afraid of a quiet piece of land?
Which perfectly sets up the most chilling anecdote from his teachings, I think.
Mm.
The haunted house investigation.
Ah, this story is wild.
It really is. So he tells a story about the time a relative of his, he calls her Ine, which is a term of respect for an older female relative, she passed away. And during the first night of the mourning period, the entire family is absolutely terrified of the deceased spirit.
They think she's going to haunt them.
Exactly. They refuse to sleep inside the house, opting to sleep outside in a hut. But Olalo, he decides to sleep inside the house, completely alone, right in front of the deceased's room.
In the pitch dark, while everyone else is huddled outside in terror.
Yep. And in the middle of the night, he wakes up to use the restroom. He looks over to the kitchen sink, and he sees a figure. It is wearing the exact clothes of Ine, just standing there in the shadows.
See, any normal person in that scenario is running, screaming out the front door.
Right. But Olalo just walks right up to the figure, pulls back the curtain, looks closely, and says, "Oh, hey, I thought you were Ine." It turns out to be a living relative who had decided to put on the deceased woman's clothes while getting a drink of water.
It's like he treats the supernatural as a forensic crime scene. He turns the lights on and investigates instead of running.
He does. But I have to push back on his philosophy here a little bit because, we have an evolutionary imperative to be startled by a mysterious figure in the dark.
Sure, fight or flight.
Right.
Right.
Our brains are hardwired to detect threats to keep us alive. Is it really fair for him to tell his followers that they just invent their problems or manufacture their fears?
That is a very fair question, and you're hitting on the exact point where his philosophy moves from personal psychology to a much broader structural critique of society.
Okay, unpack that for us.
Well, he acknowledges that basic startle responses exist, obviously, but he argues that the prolonged state of perpetual anxiety that most people live in is entirely conditioned. We are taught to be afraid, and he places the blame for that conditioning squarely on institutions.
Yeah, he explicitly targets religious institutions in his audio recordings. He claims that priests and pastors actively use fear as a mechanism of control.
His argument is that by teaching you to be terrified of hell or demonic possession or losing divine blessings, these religious leaders ensure that you cling to them.
They sell the disease so they can sell the cure.
Exactly. That is the core of his critique.
It's an incredibly bold structural narrative. And by pointing the finger at religious leaders and accusing them of running basically a spiritual protection racket, and keeping in mind for you listening, we're just looking through Olalo's specific lens right now, we're absolutely not validating his claims against any church or religion here.
Right. We're just analyzing his stated views from the source material.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But by making that claim, he positions himself as the only pure alternative.
Yeah.
He isn't asking you to fear him. He's demanding you stop fearing everything else.
And if he believes institutions use fear to control people, he has to offer a different mechanism for salvation. Looking at his official CV, he claims he offers a direct, unmediated line to God through what he calls the power of mind.
The power of mind. This is where his claimed abilities go far, far beyond basic intuition. He states that if he just talks to a person, he can see and describe their entire life story.
Past, present, and future.
Yeah. He claims to see the hidden sins of the living and the dead, regardless of how long ago they passed away. And he also claims to foresee future events.
But there is a critical distinction he makes about how this power actually functions in a healing setting. It's the difference between the treatment and the cure.
Right. I noticed that in the sources.
Yeah, he relays a direct message he says he received from God, quote, "I am the one who heals, you just treat them."
So if I'm understanding this dynamic correctly, it sounds like Olalo views himself as a kind of spiritual diagnostician. He isn't the magic medicine himself. He is just the doctor pointing out the illness. But the patient's own faith is the actual cure.
That is exactly it. He performs the treatment, which is the speaking, the revealing of sins, but God performs the physical or spiritual cure. And that cure is highly conditional.
Conditional on what exactly?
It requires the patient to have absolute, unwavering faith in Jesus Christ and in Narciso Olalo as the chosen instrument. If you doubt his legitimacy even a little bit, the cure simply will not work.
But wait, this raises a massive logistical problem for him, doesn't it? If the medicine is their own absolute faith, how do you force a skeptic to take that medicine? You don't just walk up to a guy on the street and automatically believe he has the power of mind.
No, you don't. And that is why you have to bypass their rational defenses entirely. You have to use shock value.
And the methods he uses to achieve this are incredibly intense. I mean, he tells a story about a nun. He refers to her as a madre who comes to him seeking physical healing. And he immediately uses his power to look into her past, and he sees this massive secret.
A really big one.
Yeah, he confronts her on the spot, right then and there, and reveals that she's been having a hidden affair with a priest for 35 years.
A 35-year secret. Something kept from everyone, presumably known only to her and the priest.
And when he calls her out, she completely breaks down, sobbing.
Hmm.
But according to Olalo's testimony, the very next day, this nun is able to walk again. Her physical ailment just vanishes.
And that's not an isolated incident.
No, he claims to have done similar things with others, like casually revealing in front of a group that a woman had secretly given up a child for adoption. There's another moment where he mentions calling a doubter maldita, which basically translates to mean bitchy or wicked, simply because he looked at her and saw her true nature.
He employs a highly aggressive, confrontational style of interaction.
I really struggle with the morality of this, to be honest. Calling out someone's deepest, darkest secrets in front of an audience, exposing a 35-year affair or an adoption, or just publicly humiliating someone as maldita, that feels incredibly dangerous.
It does.
Isn't there a massive risk of doing severe psychological harm to people who are already vulnerable and seeking help?
From a conventional psychological or ethical standpoint, absolutely. It is a profound violation of privacy and boundaries. But if we analyze the mechanics of his theology, we can understand why he believes the aggression is necessary.
Okay.
Because for Olalo, doubt is the single biggest obstacle to healing. It is this impenetrable wall between the person and God. He believes God shows him these deeply shameful sins purely to shatter that wall.
So the trauma of the exposure is actually the point.
Yes. Think about the cognitive dissonance. If you are holding on to a secret that you firmly believe no one on earth knows, and a stranger looks at you and casually states as fact, your entire reality fractures.
Your jaw just hits the floor.
Right. In that moment of absolute shock and vulnerability, your ego collapses. The skepticism vanishes because it has to. It is forcibly replaced by the absolute faith required for the physical and spiritual healing to take place. In his mind, he has to break their ego to save their soul.
Wow. I mean, if the goal is absolute surrender, shock and awe is certainly a highly effective tactic. But it brings up another huge question for me.
What's that?
If this guy genuinely possesses the power of mind-like, if he can break down psychological walls, read anyone's life story, and see through the fabric of reality, why isn't he a billionaire? Why isn't he the most powerful, wealthy man in the Philippines?
Because of the prime directive God gave him when he was chosen as an instrument, which is clearly outlined as the very first rule in his CV.
The rule about money.
Yes.
Yes.
He is allowed to heal, and he is allowed to preach, but he cannot collect a single cent for his services. It must be 100% free.
And he takes this rule so literally that it creates a wild paradox, especially when it comes to his relationship with casinos.
Oh, this is one of the most fascinating parts of his whole story.
It really is.
Yeah.
Olalo openly admits that with his powers, he could easily walk into any casino and completely clean them out.
Yeah.
And he actually sometimes does. He casually mentions winning grands at the tables.
He has the ability to generate massive wealth at will, but he refuses to accumulate it.
Right. He has an incredibly strict, self-imposed rule about his personal finances. He keeps one bank account where his standard monthly salary goes, and he caps that account at exactly $4,000.
Not a penny more.
Nope. If his balance goes even a little bit over that $4,000 mark, he refuses to keep the excess. He either gives it away, uses it for his healing work, or, and this is the truly fascinating part, he puts it right back into the casino.
He intentionally plays until he loses the excess.
Yes, he actively works to keep his own bank account at zero.
We have to ask why someone would actively reject wealth when it's so easily accessible to them. For Olalo, money is not a neutral tool. He firmly believes that wealth does not lead to paradise. He thinks it is a direct path to hell.
And he applies this belief directly to the real world, specifically targeting corrupt politicians.
He does not hold back on this topic.
Not at all. He goes on a very intense rant in his audio recordings about congressmen, senators, and presidents in the Philippines who steal from the people. He argues that they are driven by an insatiable greed. He says even if you gave them a literal mountain of money, they would never be satisfied.
And he ties this right back to his powers, right?
Yeah, because of his power of mind, he claims he can literally see the souls of these corrupt politicians burning in hell. He even jokes about asking God where certain specific politicians are going to end up, just so he has material to talk about with his followers.
He paints a very visceral image of ultimate
He
justice.
does. He is making massive, sweeping political indictments here against Philippine officials. And again, just as a quick reminder for you listening, we are mapping out his theology here rather than verifying his political claims. We aren't taking sides on the politics.
Right, but you can see how the structural narrative functions perfectly for his followers. It connects his view of the afterlife directly to the daily injustices they might see in the news.
Synthesizing all of this, like the rejection of the casino money, the condemnation of corrupt politicians, it reveals the core mechanism of his spiritual authority, doesn't it? In the eyes of his flock, his poverty is his proof.
Because if he were using his powers to get rich, he would just be another corrupt politician.
Or another fear-mongering pastor profiting off the congregation.
Exactly. By artificially keeping his bank account at zero, he provides tangible evidence that he cannot be bought. He proves his authenticity every single month. His power isn't derived from worldly success, it's derived from his complete demonstrable detachment from it.
It's like he's saying, I could have it all, but I choose to have nothing, therefore you can trust me.
That's exactly the message.
We've explored a truly complex portrait of a man today. I mean, Narciso Olalo is someone who fights off demons in his dreams by turning their own weapons against them. He sleeps peacefully in haunted houses just to prove a point to his terrified family.
He boldly calls out a nun's 35-year secret to forcibly shatter her doubt.
Right. And he plays the casino, but intentionally zeroes out his bank account to prove his purity. It is a wildly intricate, internally consistent web of belief.
It really is. And as we wrap up this deep dive, there is a profound psychological truth embedded inside all of these intense stories and radical claims.
What's that?
Well, we can debate the supernatural validity of the power of mind all day, and we can certainly question the ethics of his shock value healing methods. But what if the most miraculous thing about Narciso Olalo isn't his ability to see hidden sins or talk to ghosts?
Okay, I'm listening.
What if his true gift is his realization that much of the horror in our lives is entirely self-authored?
Oh, wow. Yeah, we spend so much time worrying about the fake blood and the actors jumping out at us. We forget we can just turn the lights on.
Exactly. So the next time you find yourself paralyzed by anxiety, worrying about a problem that hasn't even happened yet, or letting a past mistake dictate your future, ask yourself, are you just wandering through a horror house of your own making, waiting for a monster that isn't really there?
That is a great thought to end on. Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive. Keep exploring the unknown, keep analyzing your sources, and most importantly, keep questioning the architecture of your own fears. We'll see you next time.